So the present session is supposed to be scheduled for about 35 minutes, but we'll see, all right? As before, I'll invite our panelists to share with us their views on the topic of economics and social good in Singapore. Thereafter, the floor will be opened once again for questions. You will want to gather your thoughts and prepare your questions for that to get the best from our panel here. We are living in challenging times, unlike in the developmental stage where fairly straightforward economic progress is sought after. We now face issues of climate change, aging societies, not to mention geopolitical uncertainty and so on. Understanding meaningful living is more important than ever if the complexity of socio-economic issues may be disentangled for social good to be propagated throughout society. We are fortunate to have on our esteemed panel representations from the sciences of the environment, the social, the economics, to shine a holistic light on the following questions. Why, it's the same questions as in the morning, earlier on. Why is the advancing of social good an important consideration in the development of economic policies for Singapore? And how should the social responsibility for upholding social good be articulated for better awareness and understanding by all in an inclusive society? Yi-Chun, would you like to start?
A big question. Why is advancing of social good important consideration for Singapore, particularly in the context of an aging population? Yeah, in my presentation, I have shown that there's a direct link between demographic and economics. But I think the social good that I have in mind is, besides the tangible, is the intangible. Yeah, so we know that the tangible, the things that we can see, are the kind of a different macroeconomic environment that we live in today. It has changed. We have moved away from decades of low inflation, low interest rate, as mentioned by DPM this morning, into a macro environment with high interest rate and also a more deglobalized world. So what kind of social good is important? I outlined a few things in my presentation about the Re-Employment Act, which is really important because it helped to secure employment at more advanced age. Then health is important, and government policy in terms of the healthier SG preventive health is also quite necessary. Maybe I want to add two more points. One, I think societal attitude towards aging. Yeah, Professor Chong Wong said something that really stayed with me. He said, as earlier on, we heard about the veil of ignorance. We heard about biases, but there's one particular bias, is ageism. Ageism is very interesting because it's a bias against your own future self, right? And there's no running away. We all know that we will age, that you can't hide behind the veil of ignorance. So therefore, population aging is really about a life course policy. You do not want to wait till you are 70, then you start thinking about policy, right? Even at a younger age, you should be, societies that are still young, still need to think about aging issue. Yeah, because how to design policies against ageism, how to deliver social goods. For example, CPF policy has to evolve and change to tackle with aging population. So I think the most important social good is the mindset. Not only the mindset of the government, but a mindset among all of us. People who are still young and healthy, and any form of ageism is a bias against your own future self. This is really very well said. Yeah, so that's the thing that I want to emphasize, that social good is not just about tangibles, about providing employment security, about healthier workforce or healthier population, but more importantly, how to inculcate, how to advance the change in mindset of how we view aging. Yeah.
Thank you, Nghi Chun. Yuyen?
Hello. Great. To the first question, why advancing social good is an important part of economic policy. I think to begin with, economic development and wealth should be about meeting needs widely, and that's what I tried to emphasize in my remarks earlier. I think economists and sociologists agree on that quite fundamentally, right? That's what the economy is for, is to meet needs widely. So I think that has to be the first reason why obviously the social good has to be embedded in economic policy. But we can also think about it as, what are the costs of not embedding it more firmly in economic policy? What are the costs and consequences of not thinking more deeply about social good in economic policy going forward? And here we can think about some of the problems that we see around the world now, around political strife and political polarization and general sort of lack of harmony and peace, right? So the fallout of allowing for divisions to increase and the fallout of meeting certain persons' needs and certain groups' needs very well, but others not well, I think is sort of about the fundamentals of how in complex societies we can live together and the threats to societies living in peace and in some level of harmony. The other, I guess, is something that the speakers pointed to in various ways, and the word sustainability has come up quite a lot, right? And again, as I also spoke about earlier, there are a lot of new material realities that involve demographic change, that involve environmental crisis, right? That require collective action, that require a lot of coordination and a lot of essentially ways of resolving conflicting interests, right? Ways of coming to some kind of consensus despite conflicting interests. And I think that really needs to be forged if we want to continue to have some kind of healthy economy and growth, and that prioritizing sustainability is extremely important, for the continuation of a good life and continuation of a planet. The second question about how to raise awareness, I think in the first instance, we have to not think about raising awareness as trying to transmit information from point A to point B, in which point A is experts and government and point B is citizenry. I don't think that should be the way we think about raising awareness. And instead, we should be thinking about how there can be more institutionalized mechanisms and channels for spaces where information and ideas can be exchanged and new ideas can grow and evolve out of that. And here I think about it in two ways. One is to make sure that there are institutionals for regular democratic participation so that people can partake in multiple ways, in multiple levels, in decisions that shape their lives. And I think that is one crucial way for generating any kind of shared ideas about what societal good is and how we may need to make certain compromises as individuals, but how that is worthwhile because there is some kind of greater good. So democratic participation and channels for that, I think, are really important. The other is that, as I indicated earlier too, that a lot of how we meet our needs, the how is as important as the what needs are met. Yeah? And the how is often shaped by various options offered to us given the existing policy conditions. And here I think solidarity has to be built into a lot of ordinary practices because most people are really just busy carrying on with their lives. Yeah, working, raising children, you know. Not everybody has a lot of extra time or energy to partake in, you know, other kinds of activities, whether it's volunteering or politics or any of those things. And so there is something about the way policy is designed where it's really important that we get a sense that solidarity is a part of that, so that we can feel when we are in a public school that, you know, we are being supported publicly and that our education is something that is possible because, you know, of the public support for it, and that therefore we also need to return to it something, and that when we then become income generators, we ought to pay taxes to feed back into that, etc. And same goes for thinking about aging and support for retirement and all those things, right? In a way, we are feeding into our own futures, right? So I think policies should be oriented towards trying to convey that, yeah, in sustained and systematic ways, and also turn people away from the thinking just in terms of like, I need to figure out how to play this game and get my kid into this school through this route and, you know, invest in this in these private ways, right? And get people to move away from those more private and individualized acts and into more kind of solidaristic and greater good orientations.
Sean?
Thank you. When I first started studying the forests of Bukit Timah Nature Reserve, there was a car park, only fit 10 cars maybe, and it was never full, never. Fast forward 30 years and you have to, like post-COVID, you had to queue up on the main road to get to the summit. That's just how crowded it was. So you can see, I mean, the way we maybe view the environment, nature in particular, might have to do, maybe focus on well-being, whether it's physical well-being or mental well-being, was, again, well supported by what we saw during COVID. But I still think that maybe we are not fully exploring the social good and maybe even the economic linked elements of nature and the environment, and I think we can do a lot more. One thing I have noticed is, again, over the years when I do work, it used to be really, I would never see anybody or rarely see someone. If I did, it was either a biology student or a bird watcher or a disproportionately, say, expatriate. Whereas today you see it's a cross-section of Singapore that goes. They're of all age groups, of all ethnicities, of families. I only noticed this starting about maybe 10 years ago. So in one sense also, nature and the environment become a great leveler and a place where people different across generations, across different backgrounds and occupations, all can meet at the same place. And this, I think, this social element that makes a stable and a society that's really ready to do amazing things can take place in the natural environment. I think that's still not fully realized, and there's a lot of potential. Maybe the last thing I would say is we are a maritime nation. We can see the ocean, we see the ships and the commerce that it brings, but somehow I don't quite feel as if we internalize that, you know, that the ocean is part of us. It's physically there, but it's not. I mean, yeah, blood flows through our veins, so literally it's not the ocean. But I think we can do a lot more in developing a sense of self, of community, and of place, if we can commune with the environment in maybe a more meaningful and ultimately maybe more productive way.
Tomoki?
So in my view, social goods in the form of, say, good health, education, environment, among others, is important. Simply put, it is important for, making our society a better place to live. And, even if you have a lot of money, if you are constantly facing, societal division, stress, conflicts, you are not going to be necessarily happy. So social goods are important for make our lives better. Now, how can we promote the provision of social goods? So there are several ways. One obvious thing is, as an economist, obvious thing is incentivize, right? Giving incentives. You pay people so that they would do something for the good of the society. And this can be done in certain contexts. Think of recycling. You incentivize people to recycle, you get some points, or you get your deposit back. But this is not going to be a perfect solution. And this is perhaps not a solution in many cases, because it's hard to monitor, it's hard to devise right incentives. So eventually you have to think of other ways. Education, information campaign, these things can help. But changing people's behavior is not easy. And I don't really have a perfect solution, that I can propose. I wish I had, but it's a very time-consuming process. But if you educate from young, people's behavior do change, right? So you all know that it's wrong to steal other people's things, even if it is easy to steal, because you have certain sense of, say, morality or code of conduct or whatever you might want to call. Okay, so this has to be developed in the context of social goods, and that's not easy. But we can take time and cultivate culture to provide social goods. That's pretty much I can say.
Thanks, Tomoki. Now we open to the floor. Yes.
Hello, my name is Wei-Ning. I am teaching in Temasek Junior College. I have a question directed at Prof. Teo. I think something that you said that it really resonated with me. The idea of the individual hustle versus the shared well-being or the social solidarity as we pursue our needs. This is something we feel we see every day in school. To some extent, we have set up an incentive system where it does reward the individual hustle. When you sit for the A-levels, for example, you sit for it alone, and that result is your result. So it is. Some students do see it as an individual hustle, and to some extent, I can see why they see it as that. A narrative that we try and push across actively in our school is that it can actually be a team sport. One where, helping your friends, learning together, there can be some powerful peer effects there. And even though you sit for it alone, we can still do this together. I think, but it does feel at times that you're kind of pushing against an incentive system. I just thought to seek your insight on how we can perhaps move this needle a little bit in our education landscape.
Thank you for your question. Because I'm also a teacher at university, so I very much relate to this challenge, yeah, as an educator. I think teachers and lots of individual teachers at various levels probably are trying really hard to get students to learn not just to do well for themselves, but also to collaborate, right? Because part of our job as educators, and I think particularly for those of you who are teaching younger kids, part of our job is actually to socialize them to be good people, right? Broadly defined, of course. And so it is, I think, in the vocation of teaching that we want to try to convey values that are moving away from self-centeredness and selfishness and all that. But the challenge I think we come up against is the structure of the reward system. And those structures are the real structures that both the children and us as teachers have to work against, right? And you know, in the university setting, I think one difference compared to the earlier settings is that we can build into our structures more of rewards that value teamwork. So we have more components within each course, right? We have more components that are team projects that essentially do say to students, we're not just paying lip service to this thing called teamwork, but we're actually going to reward you for working well as a team, right? And I think that changes things a lot, right? That does shift the ways in which they think about the various kind of skills that they need to bring to the table in any given course. So I think the structure of rewards is really important. No matter how hard teachers are trying to convey those values, if those values at the end of the day are seen as peripheral, good to have rather than need to have, then of course they're going to be a lower priority. So I think that within our education system, there's a lot of space for rethinking, you know, what we're rewarding, how we're going about evaluating students, and how to create greater alignment between kind of the values we want to cultivate and then the actual signals we send through the material rewards.
We have a question there.
Thank you. Thank you all for these wonderful stories you told. I think so much thought and work goes into that. It's not like you're studying history and you can have some interpretation. There's no script about any of what you do, so it's all new and you have to create it. What I'm interested in, and Dr. Sean Noom and I was just talking about that, what is the interest of the youth in following you in these fields? Because traditionally, you know, still people like to be bankers or lawyers, and that's been a very strong tradition in Singapore. So do you see an increased interest in your fields?
I can start, but I think all four of us teach at universities, so we might have our own sort of anecdotes. But I think one thing that I've seen in the environment field is I think students have always been concerned, but I think now they're increasingly willing to speak up. So I see a kind of an activism among students that I never saw even 5 years ago. So for example, at NTU, we have a student group called Earthlink, and they have a lot of initiatives, have had, because they're an old group, but just I think 2 years ago, a group of them lobbied following the example, I think, of NUS and then also SMU, the divestment in fossil fuel stocks from the portfolio of the university. But then last year, student leaders from all the universities came together and had a joint statement. So it was the NUS, the SMU, SUTD, NTU had a joint statement that, you know, this generation really care about climate, and want to see us gradually divesting in fossil fuels because it was just bad for our future. Maybe people have those kinds of ideas, but I'd never seen that kind of action. And then to reach across to counterparts at different institutions. I thought that was very inspiring. I don't know if it would make really great headway yet, but the very fact that they're willing to come forward and speak out, I think is great. What's maybe not so good for established civil society like Nature Society is I think the participating through conventional ways, NGOs. Maybe it's not the style of this generation. It's much more spontaneous, ground up, often social media based. And how do you find a nice marriage between, or a collaborative arrangement between old and new? I think would be a fun thing to explore. But again, I don't know what my colleagues think, all of whom teach. So.
I keep it brief. Just to share my experience, I teach a course, undergraduate course called Economic Development in Asia. And it's a compulsory course. So it is compulsory course for economics students. And when I joined SMU in 2005, I think the students tended to be, more obsessed with career that gives you the highest pay. Having, say, financial sector job, make big bucks. That was a major career goal for many students. But this mindset has changed quite a bit. There are more and more students who are genuinely interested in what's going on elsewhere in Asia, and issues like development, environment, poverty, inequality, health, education. I think the interest has gone up, and maybe this is because Singapore has become richer and become more mature. So students' interests have become more diverse. At least, that's what I observe.
Since we are talking about social good, and definitely it has to involve all segments of the society. In US, I think there's a group, it stands for SAFE, Students Against Violation of the Earth. Yeah, so they are very active in that. And I actually see that in my students because in my module, I also teach another module called Singapore Economy. And in this module, students need to do a project. They have to propose a topic and then apply economic thinking to work out the questions they ask. And I'm beginning to see a lot of proposals and work on topics that are related to environment. So I have seen like people were thinking of how to tweak the COE system to take into consideration the environmental impact of vehicle ownership in Singapore. They also talk about proposals of how to impose plastic tax, plastic bags. So there are a lot of very interesting proposals which actually tell me that the students are thinking about the deeper issues and they are using the economics that they learn to tackle and to find a solution to these problems. So it's quite encouraging. Yeah, of course, the students themselves, they form a very active group to promote sustainability of the environment. Yeah.
I think it's a great question. Do young people want to be in your field? If I may, I would answer it sort of in two parts. In terms of interest in the issues I've been interested in on poverty and inequality, I've gotten a lot of response from younger people. So I give talks quite often outside of the university setting, and often in other universities or in school settings. Yeah, secondary schools, junior colleges, etc. I also give a lot of public talks, and almost always it's young people who come up and talk to me disproportionately. Yeah, and lots of young people write me emails and tell me about their interests and all that. So I think in terms of the interest in the issues, certainly that is, I think we have a very, I think we have reason to be optimistic that among the young, certainly, there's a great deal of awareness and interest in thinking about some of these issues. But in terms of entering the profession, I think that's a separate question, right? And here, I think my experience, which partly comes from being in an academic settings at conferences and things, but also because I co-edit this site called Academia SG, which is a platform set up to promote Singapore studies. So I've had also interaction with younger scholars through that channel. And here, I think there are a lot of concerns among Singaporeans who are interested in studying social issues about a few things. One is, can you make a career out of studying Singapore? Yeah, and there are many reasons that is challenging, among which some of the metrics and logics that have been introduced into universities and reward systems in universities that are very much oriented towards improving global rankings of the universities have actually made it more difficult to make a career out of studying Singapore. Yeah. In different disciplines, that looks different, but certainly in sociology, trying to meet those targets implies trying to publish in American journals, which don't have any inherent reason to be interested in a case like Singapore's. Yeah, so some of the ways in which the university reward systems are set up make it difficult to make a career. But secondly, because of the work I do and because I do a lot of kind of public sociology work, a lot of young scholars also ask me, will I get into trouble studying Singapore? Will I be blacklisted? Will I have problems with promotion? Yeah. And those are real fears, and it holds people back. Yeah, it makes people make decisions about what path they want to take, or it creates doubts in the kind of paths they want to take. And so I think that there we have profound challenges and profound barriers to overcome.
Our time is about up. I saw a question over there. Okay. In that case, let's put our hands together to thank our speakers again. And thank you very much for all your questions.
Thank you, speakers. Next, we invite Professor Chang Yang Ho, Singapore Economic Policy Forum 2022 Chairman, to give his closing remarks. Prof. Chang, please.
Thank every one of you for attending this forum to the end of the forum. So I congratulate your successful attendance today. I trust you had gotten good overview of social good, as well as food for thought on how interdisciplinary studies can contribute to advance for social good. And again, I appreciate four excellent distinguished speakers, also our moderator. So why don't you join me in thanking them again? And last but not least, our MC today, Dr. Tansha Chong, today's excellent MC from morning to until now. So please join me thanking him. So with this note, thank you very much again, and wish you have a wonderful week ahead. Thank you very much.
All right, once again, thank you to all our speakers for the very engaging session. I'd like to thank the staff of the Economic Society of Singapore, the Singapore University of Social Sciences, the support from Forward Singapore, and also the SIM Economic Society for helping out at this event. Thank you so much. We would also like to thank you after a long and fruitful day for your attention and participation. CPDD MOE would like all pre-universities and secondary school teachers to scan the QR code on the screen to give their feedback before leaving. With that, once again, my name is Chong. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again at the Singapore Economic Policy Forum 2023. Thank you and goodbye.